in your view, what is the state of play in climate science? Where are the gaps? And how effectively is climate science informing policymaking?
Well, I think the world has learned in only about a decade or 2 decades that there is a serious problem related to the burning of fossil fuels that is changing our atmosphere. Scientists found this result, and they're telling the public the atmosphere is changing in ways that will require which will change us. It'll move the sea level. It will change storms. Will make certain areas warmer. This is over the next century. We are on a path to change the planet a lot. This is science telling the public something that, one of the things I said at this meeting, is something this public understandably doesn't want to be true. We would like to be on a planet that we could not mess up doing the things we would normally prefer to choose to do. And now we have the information. I'm not answering about policy, I'm talking about everybody. We're now getting information that says that just behaving the way we would normally choose to do, all of us on the planet, creates a big enough effect on this small planet to change the planet. And so I call our task fitting on the planet. That's a task for every one of us. It may lead us to have smaller families, to change our transport behavior with respect to transport, but it's also going to lead to our governments making changes that affect us. The costs of energy will probably be higher in exchange for having less of a threat from damage from storms. I mean, we aren't going to get this for free. The costs will not be exorbitant. The other thing to say about the science is that it's not fully understood. And one of the points I certainly made here at this meeting was that the science community doesn't easily tell the public that it doesn't understand how the Earth works very well. They're a little embarrassed to say that we don't really understand clouds and that they make a big difference in how much sunlight is reflected and how warm the planet becomes. And that's actually the single biggest example, but how ice behaves and whether ice is going to melt quickly or slowly from certain places. And because of that, the consequences of what we're doing, before we talk about changing what we're doing, but the consequences of any particular actions of ours can be more or less severe, consistent with what we know about the science. Maybe in another few decades we'll know whether some of our worst fears are actually the planet we live on, or whether the planet we live on is a little bit more protected with us.
And climate science, as you were also suggesting, is pervaded by uncertainty in climate sensitivity, in the capacity to adapt that we may have, in the evaluation assessment of climate physical impacts. Do you believe that today climate science has the instruments to deal with this sort of uncertainty? This multifaceted dimension of uncertainty, multiple faces, uncertainty.
Well, climate science is progressing slowly. The world doesn't spend very much money learning new things. We have not got the research budgets either for climate science to understand the planet or for the development of solutions which will let us have a lower carbon economy. We're not spending money globally, and certainly true in my own country, in the U.S., at the rate that would be appropriate to the importance of this problem. The public isn't sufficiently convinced that this is a priority to say, I want more of my taxes to go to this. Mm-hmm. So we have a program that isn't small, it's pretty vigorous. Some of the most expensive items in the climate science are satellites that are specially designed instruments to measure properties of the planet from above. Amazingly interesting instruments. We don't learn much about them compared to what we should know. You can actually measure the height of the ice on Antarctica with a pair of satellites and lasers, so that you can see if it's a centimeter different a year later. You can pick that up. I think that's right.
It was discussed how easy it would be to reach the 2 degree, the 3 degree target at the meeting. If we had to comply with the 2 degrees targets, we would need to put in place a real energy and technological revolution. Where do you think technological innovation is mostly needed? And also, based on the discussion we had on CBR technologies, which technologies, in your view, are more promising in terms of their economic and political feasibility in helping to achieve the target?
Well, I don't think there's a winner. I think there's one paper I wrote that is better known than anything I've ever done, and the whole point of that paper was 2004. Was to argue that we needed a portfolio of approaches, both because no single one could do the job even if it were perfect success, and because some of them will turn out to work better than others. And on that list, number one is to build energy efficiency into our economy, from household appliances to factories to transport. We can probably use half as much carbon for the same functions that we are getting, if we really took efficiency seriously. And after that, there's the renewable energy sources. There's some of what we talked about today, which is putting carbon that would otherwise be in the atmosphere into green plants. Nuclear power is a help to climate change, but has major other problems, and we don't have to use... The nice thing about having a long list is you don't have to use every item on the list. But we have a lot we can be doing with technologies that are relatively familiar. We'll learn them, we'll do them smarter, do them more smartly if we practice. We are not moving very fast. We have pretty much the same problem ahead of us now that we had in 2004. There has been progress in renewable energy is dramatic. Progress in efficiency has not been particularly dramatic. There's been improvement. The American car is somewhat more efficient than it was 5 years ago, but that isn't saying much. That's because of regulation. We could do much more.
You mentioned the financial issues. Do you believe that international financial markets will be able to generate those resources needed to support a transition towards a low-carbon economy?
Well, I think the short answer is yes. Climate change is the consequence of being rich. Solving poverty requires being willing to give money to somebody else, and we can do a much better job solving poverty problems. But the wealthy generate the problem the wealthy will have to pay for. By wealthy, I don't mean super rich. I mean people who have a car, home appliances, are emitting gases into the atmosphere and have the ability, they don't want to pay more, but they have the ability to pay more. So if you talk about a poor country like India, you have wealthy people and middle-class people in India who are buying gasoline and paying for electricity, and who live more or less like the people who are creating the emissions in India live like the people in Europe. There's a very large number of much poorer people whose emissions are negligible, even multiplied by all of the people there. So wealth is creating the problem, and wealth can solve it.
As a last question, what is your view on the evolution of climate policies on the way to Durban and just beyond Durban? Are you skeptical? Are you optimistic?
There's something. When I was actually in Rio in 1992, when the Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed during the course of it, or agreed upon in the course of a 2-week meeting. It was a very exciting time. Lots of NGOs, lots of politicians. And 2012, was an important date when we basically were running out of the time. It's the expiration date for the agreements that we have, in particular for the Kyoto Protocol, which came later. And I don't think anybody expected that we would actually let the clock run out for 2012, which is next year. And right now, it really looks like we're going to go into a period of a gap with no international policy that is agreed upon, say, through the United Nations. We will actually have a gap that was inconceivable. Of course, we have enough time to get phase 2 ready while we're doing phase 1. There's such discouragement with the international approaches so far. And I'm not an expert on this, but it really may be that we don't have a successor to the Kyoto Protocol. Then we will have to, and maybe it's a blessing in disguise. We don't particularly like the agreements we have in place right now. But it's always easier to keep something going than to stop it and start it again. As I understand it, the issue for the next year or two is, are we going to have a gap? What's particularly inadequate about the arrangement in 1992 was that it divided the world into 2 pieces. The so-called Annex I countries were the industrialized countries. The so-called developing countries were excused from all the requirements, and without even a deadline, excused from all the requirements of dealing with climate change. Even though the developing countries emit about half of the world's CO2. What's been going on in the last couple of years is an attempt to fix this, to find a global formula, but it wasn't in place. It wasn't part way in 1992. It simply wasn't there. And the next agreement has to be a global agreement. Even though not everyone will do the same amount, I assume the Americans will be asked to do more than their share per capita by quite a lot. Mm-hmm. But I haven't given up on the idea that we can have an international agreement. Many people have. They think it'll be based on pairs of countries agreeing to do things and then bigger groups bottom up. But it certainly would be better if we could have a kind of an agreement around the world. Maybe all the young people who are on Facebook together can say, come on, get real, guys, to their old elders. We're all feeling like one world. We feel like we're a single set of people. The ones of us with Facebook have similar lifestyles and we live everywhere. And let's get a global agreement. Maybe we'll need a gap, and then maybe that's what we'll come up with.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks.